The Galactic Council chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian floor, its crystalline walls reaching toward a dome that displayed the swirling majesty of the Andromeda Galaxy. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sections, each area carefully designed to accommodate their unique physiological needs. The Zephyrians floated in their atmospheric bubbles. The silicon-based Korthak rested on heated stone platforms, and the aquatic Delaney occupied pressurized water tanks that gleamed like sapphires under the artificial starlight. At the center of this grand assembly, Councillor Vexhai of the Dominion stood at the primary podium. His species, the hegemony, had ruled the galactic government for over 2 millennia. Tall and imposing, with skin that shifted between deep purple and black depending on his emotional state, Vexhai commanded attention simply by existing. His 4 arms moved with practiced grace as he gestured toward the massive holographic display that materialized above the assembly. Esteemed representatives, his voice resonated through the chamber's translation matrix, ensuring every species heard his words in their native tongue. We face an unprecedented crisis. The Great Expansion has reached its limits. The hologram showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy, countless stars twinkling like scattered diamonds. Red zones pulsed ominously throughout the display, indicating areas of severe resource depletion and overcrowding. The image zoomed in on specific systems, revealing planets stripped bare of their natural wealth, space stations overcrowded beyond capacity, and trade routes clogged with desperate refugee ships. For the past 3 centuries, our member civilizations have expanded without restraint. Vexhai continued, his skin darkening to match his words. We have colonized every habitable world, exploited every resource-rich asteroid, and pushed the boundaries of sustainable growth far beyond their breaking point. The mathematics are irrefutable. We are consuming resources faster than they can be replenished. A murmur rippled through the assembly. The Tentari delegation's bioluminescent patches flickered in agitation, while the insectoid Veltar clicked their mandibles in what their species considered deep concern. In the human section, Ambassador Sarah Chun sat perfectly still, her dark eyes focused intently on the display. Her diplomatic training had taught her to maintain composure in any situation, but the implications of what she was seeing made her stomach clench. The solution, Vexhai announced, raising his voice above the growing whispers, has been debated in closed sessions for months. Our brightest minds from across the galaxy have run countless simulations, explored every alternative, and reached an inescapable conclusion. The holographic display shifted, showing complex mathematical models and resource projection charts. The data painted a picture of inevitable collapse within 50 standard years unless drastic action was taken immediately. We must reduce our galactic population by 30%, Vexhai declared. The chamber fell silent, the weight of his words settling over the assembly like a funeral shroud. Not through war, which would destroy valuable infrastructure and poison entire systems. Not through plague or famine, which would be random and potentially affect our most valuable citizens. We propose a measured, fair, and just solution. Ambassador Chen's hands clenched in her lap. She had been briefed on the rumors, whispers of a radical proposal circulating through diplomatic channels. But hearing it spoken aloud in this sacred chamber made it real in a way that chilled her to the bone. The Galactic Lottery, Vexhai announced, his 4 arms spreading wide as if embracing the concept. A completely random selection process that will choose which worlds must be discontinued. The euphemism hung in the air like poison gas. Discontinued, as if entire planets filled with billions of sentient beings were nothing more than failed business ventures to be shut down and forgotten. How does it work? Called out Representative Zixera from the Centauri delegation, her crystalline voice cutting through the stunned silence. Vexhai gestured, and the hologram shifted again, showing a simplified model of the proposed system. Every inhabited world in our galaxy will be assigned a number. These numbers will be entered into a quantum randomization matrix, completely immune to manipulation or prediction. The system will select 30% of all inhabited worlds for immediate evacuation and sterilization. Sterilization? The word came from multiple delegates simultaneously, a chorus of horror and disbelief. The selected worlds will be stripped of all life using controlled antimatter charges. Vexhai explained with the same tone one might use to describe lunch plans. This will allow for complete resource reclamation and eventual recolonization once our population levels have stabilized. The process will be quick and humane. Ambassador Chen stood slowly, her diplomatic protocols warring with her human instincts. Counselor Vexhai, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. The human delegation requests clarification on several points. Vexhai's skin shifted to a lighter purple, indicating mild annoyance. Of course, Ambassador Chen. Though I must remind the chamber that this proposal has already been approved by a preliminary vote of the council's senior members. The words hit Chen like a physical blow. The decision had already been made, and this assembly was nothing more than political theater. She pressed on anyway. You speak of fairness and justice, but randomness is not justice. A lottery system treats a research world with a population of thousands the same as a core world with billions. It doesn't consider scientific value, cultural significance, or strategic importance. Precisely, Vexhai replied, his tone suggesting he viewed this as a positive feature rather than a flaw. True justice is blind to such considerations. No species, no world, no individual can claim to be more deserving of life than another. The lottery treats all equally. What about the inhabitants of the selected worlds? This question came from the Aquari delegate, whose amphibious species had always been known for their emphasis on community and cooperation. Surely there will be attempts to relocate populations. Relocation is impossible, Vexhai stated flatly. The logistics alone would overwhelm our transportation capabilities. More importantly, relocation would simply transfer the overpopulation problem rather than solve it. The selected populations will be given a standard month to put their affairs in order and say their farewells. The casual brutality of it took Chen's breath away. An entire month to prepare for the extinction of their world and everyone on it. She thought of Earth, with its 8 billion human souls, its vast libraries and museums, its accumulated history and culture, all of it potentially erased by the luck of a cosmic draw. When will this lottery take place? She asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. In 6 standard months, Vexhai replied. This will allow time for final preparations and the construction of the necessary sterilization fleets. The drawing itself will be broadcast live to every world in the galaxy, ensuring complete transparency in the process. 6 months. Chen's mind raced through the implications. Earth would need to prepare for the possibility of selection, but more than that, humanity would need to find a way to prevent this atrocity from occurring. The human species had survived countless challenges throughout their history, natural disasters, wars, plagues, and the long journey to the stars, but they had never faced anything like this. I have additional concerns, Chen said, knowing she was walking a diplomatic tightrope, but unable to remain silent. The quantum randomization matrix you described, how can we be certain it truly is random and immune to manipulation? Vexhai's skin darkened again, but his voice remained level. The system will be designed by the galaxy's most brilliant mathematicians and computer scientists, representatives from every major species. It will be tested extensively and monitored continuously. No single entity will have the ability to influence the outcome. But someone has to build it, Chun pressed. Someone has to program it, maintain it, and operate it. In my experience, any system created by sentient beings can be influenced by sentient beings. A ripple of agreement moved through several delegations, but Vexhai cut off any further discussion with a sharp gesture. Your concerns are noted, Ambassador Chun, but they miss the fundamental point. Even if the system could be manipulated, which it cannot, such manipulation would require unprecedented cooperation among dozens of species and thousands of individuals. The complexity of such a conspiracy would make it effectively impossible. Chun sat down, but her mind continued working furiously. Vexhai was wrong about one crucial thing. He had vastly underestimated humanity's capacity for the impossible. Throughout their history, humans had repeatedly achieved things that other species considered beyond the realm of possibility. They had split atoms, reached their moon with primitive technology, and crossed the void between stars through sheer determination and ingenuity. As the session continued and other delegates raised their objections and concerns, Chen's thoughts turned to the network she would need to activate the favor she would need to call in, and the risk she would need to take. The Galactic Council believed they had designed a fair and just system, but they had made one critical error in their calculations. They had forgotten that humanity's greatest strength had always been their refusal to accept the unacceptable. The session dragged on for hours, with various species raising technical questions and procedural concerns, but the outcome was predetermined. The vote, when it finally came, was a foregone conclusion. 31 species voted in favor of the lottery, 12 voted against, and 4 abstained. The human delegation was among the minority opposition, along with several younger species that still remembered what it felt like to struggle for survival. As the delegates began to file out of the chamber, Chen remained in her seat, watching the holographic display that still showed the galaxy's star systems twinkling innocently above the assembly floor. Each point of light represented billions of lives, entire civilizations with their own hopes, dreams, and stories. In 6 months, 30% of those lights would be extinguished forever, unless she could find a way to prevent it. Her personal communicator buzzed softly against her wrist. A message from Earth, marked with the highest security protocols. Her superiors had been monitoring the session through diplomatic channels, and they wanted an immediate briefing on the situation. Chen smiled grimly as she composed a response. Her report would be brief and to the point. The galaxy had declared war on 30% of itself, and it was time for humanity to do what they did best, fight back against impossible odds. As she walked through the chamber's corridors toward the human embassy section, Chun began composing a very different kind of message in her head. This one would go out through channels that didn't officially exist to contacts whose names never appeared on any diplomatic roster. The message would be simple. The game was rigged, but the House was about to discover that humanity had been counting cards since before they learned to walk upright. The Galactic Council had created their lottery in the name of fairness and justice, but they had forgotten one of humanity's oldest sayings: the House always wins, unless someone changes the rules. And changing the rules, Chen reflected as she reached her destination, was something humans had been doing for their entire existence. The war for the galaxy's soul was about to begin, and the opening move would be made not with weapons or armies, but with mathematics, technology, and the most dangerous weapon in humanity's arsenal: their absolute refusal to go quietly into the dark. Behind her, the chamber's lights dimmed automatically as the last delegates departed, leaving the holographic galaxy spinning slowly in the darkness. 30% of those lights would soon face extinction, but they didn't know that humanity had already begun working on a solution. The lottery might be fixed, but not in the way the Galactic Council intended. Chen's footsteps echoed through the empty corridors as she walked toward what she hoped would be salvation for billions of innocent souls. The game was about to change, and the stakes had never been higher. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the center of the most secure facility on Luna, surrounded by holographic displays that would have been incomprehensible to anyone outside his specialized field. The room hummed with the quiet energy of quantum computers working at the theoretical limits of physics, their calculations creating patterns of light that danced across the curved walls like aurora on a cosmic scale. This was Prometheus Station, humanity's most classified research installation, and today it had become the headquarters of the most ambitious conspiracy in galactic history. "Show me the preliminary analysis," Webb commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 3 decades unraveling the mathematical mysteries of the universe. The primary display shifted, revealing a complex, 3-dimensional model of the proposed lottery system that the Galactic Council planned to implement. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, Webb's lead programmer, and one of the few humans who truly understood quantum cryptography at the level they were about to need, gestured towards specific components of the model. They're using a nested quantum randomization matrix with 17 layers of encryption and authentication. Each layer uses a different mathematical approach, from prime factorization to quantum entanglement patterns. Impressive, Webb admitted, studying the intricate security measures. They've clearly put considerable thought into making this tamper-proof. What's our assessment of their vulnerabilities? Tanaka's expression grew grim. On the surface, none. The system is designed by committee, with representatives from multiple species contributing different elements. No single entity has complete knowledge of how it works, and the quantum elements make it theoretically impossible to predict or alter outcomes. Theoretically, Webb repeated, emphasizing the word. But We're not dealing with theory anymore, are we? From across the room, Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her own workstation. As humanity's foremost expert on alien computer systems, she had spent years studying the technological approaches of different galactic species. I've been analyzing the architectural patterns they're likely to use. The hegemony favors crystalline matrix structures, the Zephyrians prefer biocomputation, and the Korthak use silicon-based quantum arrays. The system will need to integrate all of these approaches, and that integration creates opportunities, Webb concluded. Different technological philosophies, different security assumptions, different blind spots. Show me what we're working with. The room's central display expanded, showing a comprehensive breakdown of human intelligence on galactic technology. The information had been gathered over decades through trade missions, cultural exchanges, and activities that officially didn't exist. Every species had their technological strengths, but they also had weaknesses that became apparent only when their systems were examined from outside their own paradigms. The hegemony's crystalline systems are incredibly secure, but slow to update, Vasquez explained. The Zephyrian biocomputers are fast and adaptive, but vulnerable to specific electromagnetic frequencies. The Korthak quantum arrays are nearly impossible to hack, but require precise environmental conditions to function properly. So we're looking at a system that combines maximum security with multiple failure points, Webb mused. That's actually encouraging. The more complex a system becomes, the more opportunities it creates for unexpected interactions. Tanaka pulled up a new set of calculations. I've been modeling potential attack vectors. Direct hacking is out of the question. The security is too tight, and we'd be detected immediately. But there might be another approach. I'm listening. What if we don't try to hack the system at all? What if we hack the universe instead? The suggestion hung in the air like an impossible challenge. Webb stared at the calculations Tanaka had projected, his mind racing through the implications. You're talking about quantum manipulation on a galactic scale. Not manipulation, Tanaka corrected. Influence. The lottery system relies on quantum randomness, but quantum events aren't truly random. They're probabilistic. If we could influence those probabilities across a wide enough area, we could bias the entire system without ever touching it directly, Webb finished, his excitement growing. The random number generators would still function normally, but their output would be statistically skewed in our favor. Dr. Vasquez frowned as she considered the proposal. The energy requirements alone would be staggering. We're talking about influencing quantum events across thousands of light years. Current human technology couldn't generate that kind of power. Current human technology, Webb agreed. But we have 6 months to build something better. And, more importantly, we have something no other species in the galaxy possesses. What's that? Vasquez asked. Webb smiled for the first time since the crisis had begun. We have a species-wide talent for impossible solutions to unsolvable problems. Dr. Tanaka, I want you to begin working on the theoretical framework for large-scale quantum probability manipulation. Dr. Vasquez, start identifying the specific components we'll need from other species technologies. I'll handle the political side of this operation. As the team dispersed to their respective tasks, Webb remained in the center of the room, staring at the model of the galaxy that floated before him. 30% of those star systems were condemned to die unless his team could pull off a miracle. The odds against success were astronomical, but humanity had always specialized in defying astronomical odds. His personal communicator chimed with an incoming message from Ambassador Chun. The text was brief, but loaded with meaning. Package delivery confirmed. Preparing distribution network. In diplomatic code, that meant she had successfully made contact with the resistance cells that existed within multiple alien governments, officials who opposed the lottery, but lacked the power to stop it through normal channels. Webb's smile widened as he began composing his reply. Chen's network would provide them with inside information on the lottery system's development, while his team worked on the technological solution that would save billions of lives. The Galactic Council believed they had created an impossible-to-defeat system, but they had made one crucial error in their calculations. They had underestimated humanity's capacity for creative cheating. Over the following weeks, Prometheus Station became a hub of activity unlike anything in its history. Scientists and engineers worked around the clock, their efforts coordinated through encrypted quantum channels that connected them to similar facilities hidden throughout human space. On Europa Station, specialists in exotic matter physics began constructing the massive energy collection arrays they would need for their plan. On Titan Base, quantum mechanics engineers designed the projection systems that would influence probability fields across interstellar distances. But the most crucial work was happening in the minds of humanity's greatest theorists, as they grappled with scientific challenges that pushed the boundaries of known physics. The plan they were developing required precise coordination of quantum events across the entire galaxy, a feat that most species would have dismissed as impossible fantasy. Dr. Tanaka's breakthrough came during her 37th consecutive hour of calculations. She had been modeling quantum probability cascades when she noticed an unexpected pattern in the mathematics. "Dr. Webb," she called out, her voice hoarse from exhaustion, but electric with excitement. "I think I found our solution." Webb hurried to her workstation, where complex equations covered every available display surface. "What am I looking at?" "Quantum entanglement networks," Tanaka explained, highlighting specific elements of her calculations. Every species in the galaxy uses quantum technology, which means they're constantly creating entangled particles. These particles remain connected regardless of distance, and their quantum states influence each other instantaneously. The galaxy-wide quantum web breathed, understanding immediately. "You're saying we can use existing alien technology as a carrier for our probability manipulation?" "Exactly. We don't need to generate enough power to influence the entire galaxy directly. We just need to introduce the right quantum states into the existing network and let the entanglement effects propagate naturally." Webb studied the equations, his mind working through the implications. "This could actually work. But we need precise information about every major quantum system in galactic civilization. That kind of intelligence would be already available." Dr. Vasquez interrupted from across the room. She had been monitoring their conversation while working on her own projects. "Ambassador Chen's network has been feeding us technical specifications for months. I have detailed blueprints for most of the major quantum installations in Council space." The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place with an elegance that made Webb almost believe in destiny. Humanity had been preparing for this moment without realizing it, accumulating the knowledge and capabilities they would need through decades of exploration and scientific advancement. "How long do we need to implement this?" Webb asked. Tanaka consulted her calculations. "The quantum cascade will need to be initiated at least 48 hours before the lottery drawing to ensure proper propagation throughout the galactic quantum network. But once we start the process, there's no stopping it. We'll have one chance to get this right. And if we fail, then 30% of the galaxy dies, and we'll probably be executed as war criminals," Vasquez said with characteristic bluntness. "But if we succeed, we'll have saved billions of lives and proven that humanity deserves its place among the galactic civilizations." Webb nodded grimly. "Then we'd better not fail. I want detailed mission plans within the week, and I want backup systems for our backup systems. This isn't just about human survival anymore. We're fighting for the soul of galactic civilization itself." As the weeks passed, Webb's team refined their plan with obsessive precision. They identified the key quantum installations that would serve as their primary injection points for the probability cascade. They calculated the exact frequencies and amplitudes needed to bias the lottery results without triggering the system's security protocols. They developed contingency plans for every possible failure mode they could imagine. But perhaps most importantly, they began to understand the true magnitude of what they were attempting. They weren't just fixing a rigged lottery. They were taking on the fundamental power structure of galactic civilization. The hegemony and their allies had ruled through fear and force for millennia, but they had never faced an opponent who could turn their own technological superiority against them. Dr. Webb stood once again in the center of Prometheus Station, but now the holographic displays showed something very different. Instead of alien technology to be defeated, they showed human innovation preparing to reshape the galaxy. The quantum probability manipulators were nearly complete. The injection protocols had been tested and retested, and the coordination networks were ready to execute their plan across hundreds of star systems simultaneously. "Status report," he commanded, and the responses came from around the room in crisp, professional tones. "Europa Array is fully operational and standing by. Titan projection systems are online and synchronized. Earth-based quantum computers are running final calculations. Ambassador Chen reports that resistance networks are in position throughout Council space. Webb took a deep breath, feeling the weight of billions of lives resting on his shoulders. In 3 days, the Galactic Council would conduct their lottery, confident that their system was foolproof, and their decision was just. They had no idea that humanity had spent months preparing to turn their own creation against them. Initiate preliminary quantum cascade in T-minus 60 hours, Webb ordered. And may whatever gods are listening forgive us for what we're about to do. The war for the galaxy's future was about to enter its most crucial phase, and humanity was preparing to fire the opening shot in a battle that would be fought not with weapons but with mathematics and the inexorable laws of physics themselves. The quantum cascade began precisely 48 hours before the scheduled lottery drawing, rippling through subspace in ways that existed beyond the perception of any conventional sensor. Dr. Webb watched the probability waves propagate across the galaxy from Prometheus Station's main command center, his eyes fixed on displays that showed patterns of mathematics so complex they resembled abstract art more than scientific data. Cascade propagation at 60% and climbing, Dr. Tanaka reported from her position at the primary control console. Her fingers moved across holographic interfaces with practiced precision, making minute adjustments to keep the quantum waves within acceptable parameters. No signs of detection from Council monitoring systems. Webb nodded, but his attention was focused on the Cascade's interaction with the Galactic Quantum Network. The plan depended on their ability to influence probability without triggering any of the security protocols that surrounded the lottery system. They were essentially performing surgery on reality itself, using instruments made of pure mathematics and powered by the fundamental forces of the universe. Dr. Vasquez, what's our status on the injection points? Webb asked. Elena Vasquez looked up from her workstation, where she was monitoring quantum installations across 17 different star systems. All primary targets are showing nominal interaction with our cascade. The hegemony's crystalline matrices are absorbing our probability bias without any apparent recognition of external influence. Zephyrian biocomputers are adapting to the new quantum states as if they were natural fluctuations. And the Korthak installations? More challenging, Vasquez admitted. Their silicon-based quantum arrays are detecting minor anomalies, but they're interpreting them as natural quantum decay rather than deliberate manipulation. We're within acceptable parameters for now. Webb allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. The first phase of their plan was proceeding smoothly, but they were still hours away from the critical moment when the lottery system would activate, and the manipulation would either succeed or fail catastrophically. Across the galaxy, the effects of humanity's quantum intervention were beginning to manifest in ways both subtle and profound. On hegemony worlds, quantum computers experienced tiny fluctuations in their random number generation that fell well within normal operational parameters. Biocomputers on Zephyrian colonies adapted to new quantum states with the organic flexibility that made their technology so resilient. Silicon arrays on Korthak mining platforms registered minute changes in their environmental readings, adjustments so small they were automatically compensated for by routine maintenance protocols. None of the alien species detected what was happening because humanity had designed their attack to work with alien technology rather than against it. Instead of forcing changes that would trigger security systems, they were encouraging each technological paradigm to evolve in directions that would serve humanity's purposes. Incoming transmission from Ambassador Chen, Dr. Vasquez announced. Priority encryption. Webb activated the communication channel, and Chen's image appeared on the main display. She was calling from her office in the Galactic Council complex, her expression carefully neutral despite the magnitude of what they were discussing. Dr. Webb, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the quantum communication link. I have updates from our assets within the Council structure. The lottery preparation team is reporting minor irregularities in their preliminary system tests, but nothing they consider significant enough to delay the drawing. What kind of irregularities? Webb asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Random number generators are producing patterns that are technically within acceptable parameters, but statistically unusual. Quantum matrices are showing correlation patterns that shouldn't exist in truly random systems. The lead technician is attributing it to pre-activation jitters and planning to run additional calibration routines. Webb smiled grimly. The human quantum cascade was working exactly as designed. introducing subtle biases into the lottery system that would accumulate over time into a decisive advantage. The alien technicians were detecting the effects, but not the cause, which meant their calibration efforts would be useless against manipulation that existed at the level of fundamental physics. How are our resistance assets positioned? Webb asked. Ready for implementation phase, Chen replied. We have sympathetic officials in monitoring positions throughout the lottery infrastructure. When the time comes, they'll be able to provide us with real-time data on the system's operation and help us make any necessary adjustments. Excellent. What's the mood among the council delegations? Chen's expression darkened. Confident. Councillor Vexhai held a press conference yesterday announcing that the lottery represents the dawn of a new era of galactic prosperity. Most species are treating the drawing as a celebration of rational governance. The casual callousness of it made Webb's jaw clench. 30% of galactic civilization was about to face extinction, and their executioners were planning to celebrate the event as a triumph of logical thinking. It reinforced his conviction that what they were doing was not just tactically necessary, but morally imperative. Maintain your position and continue monitoring, Webb instructed. We're approaching the critical phase, and I want to know immediately if anything changes in the council complex. The transmission ended, leaving Webb alone with his team as they continued their vigil over humanity's most ambitious undertaking. The quantum cascade had been running for 36 hours now, gradually shifting probability patterns across the entire galaxy. Soon, those accumulated changes would determine which worlds lived and which worlds died. Dr. Webb, Tanaka called out, her voice carrying a note of urgency. We're getting some unexpected feedback from the Cascade Network. The probability patterns are more stable than our models predicted. Webb hurried to her workstation, studying the data streams that showed the quantum cascade's interaction with galactic civilization. Explain. Our initial calculations assumed that alien quantum systems would resist external influence, requiring us to constantly adjust our manipulation to maintain effectiveness. But the actual systems are adapting to our probability bias and incorporating it into their normal operation patterns. Is that good or bad for our plan? Good in the short term. It means our manipulation is more effective than we hoped. But it also means we're creating permanent changes in the galactic quantum infrastructure. This won't be a one-time intervention. We're reshaping the fundamental probability matrix of the entire galaxy. Webb stared at the implications of what Tanaka was telling him. They had set out to fix a rigged lottery, but they were apparently rewiring the mathematical foundations of galactic civilization itself. The responsibility of it was staggering, but there was no turning back now. Will this affect our ability to complete the mission? He asked. No, Tanaka said firmly. If anything, it makes success more certain. The lottery system is going to draw numbers from a probability field that we've fundamentally altered. There's no way for it to detect or compensate for changes that exist at the quantum level. Then, we proceed as planned, Webb decided. Monitor the stability patterns and be ready to make adjustments if necessary. But our primary objective remains unchanged. As the hours passed, Prometheus Station became a nerve center for an operation that spanned the entire galaxy. Status reports flowed in from human installations on dozens of worlds, each confirming that their local quantum manipulation systems were functioning normally. The coordination required was staggering. Thousands of scientists and technicians working in perfect synchronization to maintain humanity's assault on the laws of probability themselves. But, perhaps more remarkably, none of the galaxy's other species had any idea what was happening. The quantum cascade operated at a level of reality so fundamental that it was invisible to conventional observation. Alien scientists were detecting its effects, but attributing them to natural phenomena or minor technical glitches. 18 hours to lottery activation, Dr. Vasquez announced. All systems showing green status across the board. Webb nodded, but his attention was focused on the holographic display that showed the galaxy-wide probability matrix. What had started as a uniform distribution of chance was now showing distinct patterns. Areas where certain outcomes had become more likely, while others had become nearly impossible. The mathematics were beautiful in their complexity, like a symphony written in the language of pure physics. Dr. Webb, Tanaka said suddenly, her voice sharp with concern. I'm detecting anomalous activity in the hegemony's central quantum installation. Something's changed in their security protocols. Webb's blood ran cold as he processed what that might mean. The hegemony's central installation was the heart of the lottery system, the primary quantum generator that would determine which worlds lived and died. If they had detected the human manipulation, what kind of change, he demanded? They've implemented additional monitoring routines, scanning for external quantum influences. Our cascade is still undetected, but the new protocols might identify it if they run long enough. How long do we have? Tanaka's fingers flew over her controls as she ran rapid calculations. Based on their scan patterns and processing speed, they'll detect our quantum signature in approximately 14 hours. 4 hours before the lottery drawing, Webb calculated grimly. We need to accelerate our timeline. Can we complete the probability manipulation early? Yes, but at significant risk, Tanaka warned. Compressing the cascade will make it more visible to detection systems. We might succeed in fixing the lottery only to be exposed as responsible for the manipulation. Webb considered the alternatives. If they were discovered, humanity would face the combined wrath of the entire Galactic Council. Earth and every human colony would be marked for immediate destruction, not through the random chance of a lottery, but through deliberate extermination. But if they did nothing, 30% of galactic civilization would die, and humanity would be forced to live under a government that had proven itself capable of genocide on an unimaginable scale. Begin cascade compression, he ordered. We'll take the risk of exposure rather than guarantee mass murder. The next few hours were the most intense in Prometheus Station's history. Dr. Tanaka and her team worked frantically to accelerate the quantum cascade while maintaining its effectiveness, compressing months of carefully planned manipulation into a few critical hours. The probability waves that had been gently influencing the galactic quantum network suddenly intensified, pushing the boundaries of what alien technology could absorb without recognizing external influence. Cascade compression at 80%, Tanaka reported, sweat beading on her forehead despite the controlled environment. Probability bias is holding stable, but we're starting to see detection warnings from multiple alien installations. Can you mask the signature? Webb asked. Working on it, Dr. Vasquez replied from her position at the countermeasure console. I'm introducing false quantum noise to confuse their scanning algorithms, but it's only buying us time. Webb watched the countdown timer that showed 10 hours remaining until the lottery drawing. They were cutting it dangerously close, but the alternative was unthinkable. Billions of sentient beings were depending on humanity's ability to cheat fate itself, and he refused to let them down. Dr. Webb came a new voice from the communication station. Incoming priority message from Ambassador Chun. The Galactic Council has just announced that the lottery drawing has been moved up by 6 hours. They're citing technical readiness and public anticipation as the reasons for the change. Webb felt the blood drain from his face. The hegemony had detected something, and they were trying to outmaneuver humanity's unknown interference by changing the timeline. It was a desperate move, but one that threatened to undermine everything they had worked for. New timeline, he announced to his team. 4 hours to lottery activation. Dr. Tanaka, complete the cascade compression immediately. Dr. Vasquez, implement all countermeasures and pray they're enough. The final phase of humanity's greatest gamble was about to begin, and the stakes had never been higher. The Galactic Council's lottery chamber had been transformed for the greatest drawing in galactic history. Massive holographic displays surrounded the central platform where the quantum randomization matrix hummed with barely contained power. Representatives from every member species filled the amphitheater-style seating, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, whistles, harmonics, and electromagnetic pulses that the translation systems rendered into a constant murmur of anticipation. Ambassador Chen sat in the human delegation section, her diplomatic composure masking the terror and excitement warring within her chest. In 3 hours, the lottery would determine the fate of 30% of galactic civilization. But she was one of only a handful of beings in the chamber who knew that the outcome had already been decided by humanity's intervention. The question was whether Dr. Webb's team had successfully completed their manipulation in time. Counselor Vexhai stood at the primary podium, his ceremonial robes marking him as the administrator of galactic justice. His skin had shifted to a deep blue-purple that indicated solemn authority, and his 4 arms moved in precise gestures as he addressed the assembly. Citizens of the galaxy, His voice resonated through translation matrices that carried his words to billions of viewers across thousands of star systems. Today we witness the dawn of a new era. For too long, our civilization has consumed more than it could sustain. Today we take the difficult but necessary step toward a balanced and prosperous future. Chen's personal communicator vibrated against her wrist with a coded message from Prometheus Station. She glanced at it carefully, maintaining the appearance of casual attention to the proceedings. The message was brief but crucial. Final phase implemented. Outcome probability at 97%. 97%. Dr. Webb's team had managed to bias the lottery so thoroughly that the results were essentially predetermined, but that still left a 3% chance of catastrophic failure. Chun tried to calculate how many worlds would die if humanity's intervention failed, but the numbers were too large to comprehend. Billions of lives hung in the balance of mathematical calculations that existed at the very edge of possibility. The quantum matrix has been programmed with the coordinates of every inhabited world in our galactic civilization. HFY continued. 47,312 worlds, each representing the hopes and dreams of countless sentient beings. The system will select 30% of these worlds through a process of pure randomness, ensuring that no species, no ideology, and no political consideration can influence the outcome. As if responding to his words, the central quantum matrix began to glow more brightly. The device was a masterpiece of cooperative engineering, incorporating technological elements from dozens of different species into a unified system that represented the pinnacle of galactic science. Crystalline matrices from the hegemony created the primary computational structure, while Zephyrian biocomputers provided adaptive processing capabilities. Cortex silicon arrays managed the quantum field generators, and smaller contributions from other species added layers of complexity and security. It was also, Chen knew, thoroughly compromised by humanity's quantum manipulation. Every alien technology in the system had been subtly influenced by the probability cascade that Dr. Webb's team had been propagating across the galaxy. The random numbers it would generate would still be mathematically valid, but they would be biased in ways that no conventional analysis could detect. Before we begin the selection process, HFY announced, the technical committee will perform final verification procedures to ensure the integrity of our system. Chen's pulse quickened as she watched a team of alien technicians surround the quantum matrix with scanning equipment. This was the moment of greatest danger. If the hegemony's enhanced security protocols detected the human quantum signature, everything would collapse into disaster. She watched the technicians work, their alien faces unreadable as they ran diagnostics on the most sophisticated randomization system ever constructed. Minutes passed like hours as the technical team completed their scans. Chen noticed that several of the senior technicians were huddled around a particular display, their body language suggesting concern or confusion. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she watched them point at readings that she couldn't interpret from her position in the gallery. Finally, the lead technician approached HFY's podium and activated a private communication channel. Chen watched their brief exchange, trying to read meaning into alien gestures and expressions. After what felt like an eternity, HFY straightened and addressed the assembly once again. The technical committee reports minor quantum fluctuations consistent with natural background radiation, he announced. These fluctuations are well within acceptable parameters and will not affect the integrity of our selection process. We are cleared to proceed. Chen nearly sagged with relief. Dr. Vasquez's countermeasures had worked. The human quantum manipulation was being dismissed as natural phenomena. The lottery would proceed as scheduled, but with an outcome that humanity had predetermined through the most sophisticated scientific conspiracy in galactic history. Citizens of the galaxy, HFY continued, we are ready to begin the selection process. The quantum matrix will generate coordinates for 14,194 worlds, 30% of our inhabited planets. These worlds will have one standard month to complete their affairs before sterilization procedures begin. The casual mention of sterilization sent a chill through Chen's body. She was watching the preliminary stages of genocide, dressed up in the language of rational necessity and democratic process. The only thing that made it bearable was her knowledge that humanity had rigged the game to protect the innocent. Initiate the quantum randomization sequence, Vex-High commanded. The central matrix began to pulse with increasing intensity, its various technological components working in perfect harmony to generate what everyone believed would be truly random coordinates. Holographic displays throughout the chamber showed the mathematical processes in real time, quantum equations, and probability calculations that represented the mathematical beauty of pure chance. But Chen knew that chance had been murdered in its sleep by human ingenuity. The equations were real, the mathematics were valid, but the fundamental quantum substrate that drove them had been subtly altered across the entire galaxy. The matrix was performing exactly as designed, but it was drawing its random numbers from a probability field that humanity had carefully crafted over the past 48 hours. First selection complete, the technical team announced. Coordinates: Galactic Sector 7741, System Designation Alpha Centauri Sol Gamma, Planetary Identification Index 4. Chen's blood ran cold as she processed what she had just heard. The first world selected for destruction was in the Alpha Centauri system, one of humanity's closest neighbors and home to nearly 2 billion human colonists. If the lottery was proceeding randomly, humanity should have been just as vulnerable as any other species. But then, she remembered Dr. Webb's explanation of how their manipulation worked. They weren't protecting human worlds specifically. They were protecting all inhabited worlds by ensuring that the lottery would select only uninhabited planets, failed colonies, and research stations with minimal populations. The system would still select 30% of the galaxy's cataloged worlds, but those worlds would be chosen from a small percentage that humanity had designated as acceptable losses. Second selection complete, came the next announcement. Coordinates: Galactic Sector 2156, System Designation Vega Minor, Planetary Identification Index 12. Chen quickly accessed her personal database to check the selected coordinates. Vega Minor 12 was a failed mining operation that had been abandoned 15 years ago due to geological instability. According to her records, the world was completely uninhabited and had no strategic or scientific value. The pattern continued as the selections proceeded. World after world was chosen for destruction, but every single selection corresponded to planets that humanity's intelligence networks had identified as uninhabited, abandoned, or containing only minimal research populations. The quantum matrix was performing flawlessly, generating mathematically perfect, random numbers that consistently selected the exact worlds that humanity wanted to sacrifice. "This is remarkable," whispered the Aquari delegate seated near Chun. "The randomization pattern is selecting a disproportionate number of uninhabited worlds. It's as if the universe itself recognizes the value of sentient life." Chen nodded solemnly, playing her part in the cosmic deception. "Perhaps there is some justice built into the fundamental laws of physics," she replied, her words carrying more truth than the alien delegate could possibly realize. As the hours passed, the true scope of humanity's achievement became clear. Of the first 1,000 worlds selected, less than 50 contained significant populations, and most of those were research stations or military installations with populations in the thousands rather than millions. The Galactic Council had expected to eliminate roughly 30% of the galaxy's sentient population, but humanity's intervention was ensuring that less than 1% would actually die. "The selection process is proceeding with remarkable efficiency," Vex-High announced to the Assembly. "Our quantum matrix is demonstrating the mathematical beauty of pure randomness, selecting worlds across all sectors and species without bias or preference." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on Chun. The lottery was indeed proceeding without bias or preference toward any alien species. But humanity had built their own bias so deeply into the quantum foundations of the universe that it was invisible to any conventional analysis. They had cheated on a scale so massive that the cheating itself had become part of the natural order. 7,000 selection complete, the technicians announced. Continuing with second phase randomization protocols. Chun checked her chronometer. They were halfway through the selection process, and so far not a single heavily populated world had been chosen for destruction. The mathematical probability of such an outcome occurring naturally was so infinitesimally small that it should have triggered immediate investigation. But the alien species had no framework for understanding manipulation at the quantum level. Her communicator buzzed with another message from Prometheus Station. "Cascade holding steady. No detección." Estimate final success probability at 99.6%. Dr. Webb's team had done the impossible. They had reached into the fundamental structure of reality itself and altered the outcome of the most important lottery in galactic history. 30% of the galaxy's worlds would still be destroyed, but they would be empty worlds, dead worlds, worlds whose loss would represent an economic inconvenience rather than a humanitarian catastrophe. 12,000 selection complete, came the announcement. Entering final randomization phase. Chen allowed herself to relax slightly as the selections entered their final phase. The pattern had held consistent throughout the entire process. The quantum matrix was selecting exactly the worlds that humanity wanted it to select, with mathematical precision that appeared completely random to anyone who didn't know about the underlying manipulation. But even as she celebrated humanity's victory, Chen couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. They had saved billions of lives and prevented a genocide of unimaginable scope, but they had also demonstrated that humanity could manipulate the fundamental laws of physics on a galactic scale. That kind of power would not go unnoticed forever, and when the other species realized what had happened, the political consequences would be enormous. The lottery drawing was approaching its conclusion, and with it the end of the most successful conspiracy in the history of sentient civilization. But Chen suspected that this victory would ultimately prove to be just the beginning of an even larger conflict, one that would determine not just which worlds lived or died, but which species would control the future of galactic civilization itself. Final selection complete, the technicians announced. Quantum randomization matrix has successfully selected 14,194 worlds for sterilization procedures. Counselor Vexhai raised his forearms in a gesture of solemn finality. The selection has been completed. The universe has spoken through the voice of pure mathematics, and we must accept its judgment with dignity and resolve. As the chamber erupted in the alien equivalent of applause, Chen sat quietly in her seat and thought about the long road ahead. Humanity had won this battle through superior science and absolute determination, but the war for the galaxy's future was far from over. 6 months after the lottery, Dr. Marcus Webb stood before the assembled leaders of human space in the secure conference chamber deep beneath Geneva's rebuilt city center. The holographic displays around him showed the statistical aftermath of humanity's greatest gamble. Charts and graphs that told a story of salvation measured in billions of lives preserved and countless civilizations spared from extinction. The final numbers are conclusive, Webb reported to the gathering of admirals, prime ministers, and colony governors who represented humanity's scattered presence across the galaxy. Of the 14,194 worlds selected for sterilization, only 47 contained significant civilian populations. The total sentient casualties were approximately 3.2 million beings, rather than the projected 40 billion. The magnitude of what they had accomplished hung in the air like a physical presence. Through precise manipulation of quantum probability fields across the entire galaxy, humanity had reduced the largest genocide in galactic history to what amounted to a series of unfortunate accidents. The Galactic Council believed they had successfully culled 30% of inhabited worlds through random selection, never realizing that their lottery had been completely rigged from the moment it began. Admiral Sarah Chun, recently promoted from her ambassadorial position for a crucial role in the conspiracy, studied the data with the focused attention of someone who had lived through every moment of the crisis. "What's our assessment of galactic reaction to the lottery results?" she asked. "Mixed," Webb replied, calling up new displays that showed political analysis from across civilized space. Most species are attributing the low casualty numbers to statistical chance, divine intervention, or evidence that the universe itself recognizes the value of sentient life. A few of the more scientifically sophisticated civilizations are expressing puzzlement at the mathematical improbability of such an outcome. But no direct suspicion of manipulation? Not yet, Webb confirmed. Our quantum cascade was designed to operate at levels that are effectively undetectable by current alien technology. To them, it appears that they conducted a perfectly random lottery that just happened to produce remarkably fortunate results. President Liu Yan of the Earth Federation leaned forward in her chair, her expression grave despite the positive reports. Dr. Webb, walk us through the long-term implications of what we've done. We've saved billions of lives, which is obviously a good thing, but we've also demonstrated capabilities that fundamentally change humanity's position in galactic politics. Webb nodded, having anticipated this crucial question. We've proven that humanity can manipulate reality itself on a galactic scale without detection. That's both an enormous advantage and an enormous responsibility. The techniques we developed could be used to influence any quantum-based system in galactic civilization, from communication networks to defense systems to economic infrastructure. Are you suggesting we continue this kind of covert manipulation? Asked Governor Martinez from the Proxima Centauri colonies. I'm suggesting that we now have options that didn't exist before, Webb replied carefully. The galactic civilization we're part of just demonstrated its willingness to commit genocide in the name of resource management. That's not a civilization we can trust to act in humanity's best interests, or anyone's best interests for that matter. Admiral Chun pulled up her own set of displays, showing intelligence reports that painted a disturbing picture of galactic politics following the lottery. Dr. Webb is right about the bigger picture. The lottery didn't solve the resource crisis, it just postponed it. The Galactic Council is already discussing Phase 2 of their population management program, which would involve another lottery in 25 years. The implications hit the assembled leaders like a physical blow. The lottery hadn't been a desperate one-time measure. It was the beginning of a systematic program of periodic genocide that would continue indefinitely. Even worse, the success of the first lottery, from the Council's perspective, had validated their approach and made future lotteries more likely rather than less. What are our options? President Liu asked bluntly. Webb activated a new set of displays that showed 3 potential paths forward for humanity. Option 1. We maintain our current position and continue covert intervention whenever the Council threatens mass casualties. This preserves the status quo while protecting innocent lives, but it requires us to maintain deception indefinitely. Option 2. Admiral Chin prompted. We reveal our capabilities and attempt to negotiate a new power structure within galactic civilization. This could lead to humanity gaining significant political influence, but it might also result in the other species uniting against us out of fear. And option 3? Webb's expression grew grim as he contemplated the most radical possibility. We use our quantum manipulation capabilities to fundamentally restructure galactic civilization without the consent or knowledge of the other species. Essentially, we become the secret puppet masters of the entire galaxy. The silence that followed was profound and uncomfortable. Every leader in the room understood that they were discussing the future of not just humanity, but of every sentient species in the galaxy. The power that Dr. Webb's team had unleashed was unprecedented in its scope and implications. Are there any other options? Governor Martinez asked quietly. One more, Webb admitted. We could destroy our quantum manipulation technology and pretend the lottery results were genuine. This would return us to our previous position as a junior member of galactic civilization, but it would also leave us defenseless against future lotteries. President Liu stood and walked to the holographic display that showed the galaxy in all its magnificent complexity. Trillions of stars, millions of civilizations, billions of worlds containing countless forms of life. The responsibility of making decisions that would affect all of it was staggering. Dr. Webb, she said finally, what's your personal recommendation? Webb had been dreading this question, but he had also been preparing for it since the lottery conspiracy began. I believe we need to pursue a modified version of option 3. We continue developing our quantum manipulation capabilities, but we use them to guide galactic civilization toward more ethical behavior rather than simply controlling it outright. Explain. We can influence the Galactic Council's decision-making processes without them realizing it. Bias their quantum computers to make genocide seem mathematically unfavorable. Adjust probability fields to make cooperation more likely than conflict. Gradually steer the entire galaxy toward a more sustainable and humane approach to resource management. Admiral Chun frowned as she considered the proposal. That's an enormous responsibility. We'd essentially be making moral decisions for the entire galaxy. Someone's going to make those decisions anyway, Webb replied. The question is whether it's going to be a species that's willing to commit genocide for economic convenience, or a species that just risked everything to prevent that genocide from happening. The debate that followed was intense and wide-ranging, touching on philosophy, ethics, technology, and the fundamental nature of power and responsibility. Some leaders argued that humanity had no right to manipulate other species without their consent, regardless of the noble intentions behind such manipulation. Others contended that the galaxy's existing power structure had already proven itself morally bankrupt and needed to be replaced by any means necessary. But gradually, a consensus emerged around the recognition that humanity had already crossed the line when they rigged the lottery. There was no going back to innocence or ignorance of their capabilities. The only question was how to use their power responsibly. "We implement Dr. Webb's proposal," President Liu announced after hours of discussion. "But with strict limitations and oversight, we use our quantum manipulation capabilities to prevent future genocides and encourage ethical behavior, but we don't use them to advance humanity's interests at the expense of other species." "How do we ensure that these limitations are maintained?" asked Governor Martinez. Admiral Chun answered before Webb could respond. "We establish a secret council with representatives from every major human colony and government. Any use of quantum manipulation technology requires unanimous approval from this council. We also mandate regular reviews of our activities to ensure we're not abusing our power." Webb nodded approvingly. "I'd also suggest that we begin careful recruitment of sympathetic individuals from other species, not to manipulate them, but to give us broader perspective on the moral implications of our actions. If we're going to guide galactic civilization, we need to understand how that guidance affects non-human perspectives." The meeting continued for another 6 hours as the leaders worked out the practical details of humanity's new secret role as guardians of galactic civilization. They established protocols for quantum manipulation operations, created oversight mechanisms to prevent abuse, and began planning for the technological infrastructure that would be needed to maintain their intervention capabilities. But perhaps most importantly, they grappled with the psychological and philosophical implications of what they were undertaking. Humanity had always defined itself as a species that fought against impossible odds and refused to accept defeat, but now they were accepting a level of responsibility that went far beyond their own survival. As the meeting finally concluded and the leaders began to disperse back to their respective domains across human space, Dr. Webb remained behind to contemplate what they had set in motion. The lottery had been just the beginning, a proof of concept for capabilities that could reshape the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. 3 years later, those capabilities would be put to the test again when the hegemony proposed a new efficiency initiative that would have eliminated all species that failed to meet certain productivity standards. The quantum manipulation that prevented this second genocide was so subtle that most galactic governments didn't even realize a genocide had been planned. 5 years after that, when territorial disputes between the Korthak and Zephyrian empires threatened to erupt into a war that could have consumed entire star systems, carefully applied probability adjustments encouraged diplomatic solutions that all parties believed they had developed independently. And decade after decade, humanity continued its invisible work of shepherding galactic civilization away from its worst impulses while encouraging its better angels. The other species never learned of humanity's role in their gradually improving fortunes, but they didn't need to. What mattered was that genocide became unthinkable, that cooperation became more profitable than conflict, and that the galaxy slowly transformed into the kind of civilization that could nurture life rather than casually destroying it. The lottery had been rigged, but in the end, everyone won except those who had been willing to murder billions for the sake of economic efficiency. And humanity, having proven that impossible things were just problems waiting for creative solutions, continued to do what they had always done best: fight for a better future, even when that future seemed impossible to achieve. Dr. Webb's final report on the lottery operation was stored in the deepest archives of human civilization, marked with security classifications that wouldn't be lifted for 1,000 years. But its conclusion was simple and profound. We set out to fix a rigged lottery and ended up fixing a broken galaxy. The house may always win, but sometimes the house forgets that the players can change the game itself. The greatest conspiracy in galactic history had succeeded beyond its architects' wildest dreams, not because humanity had cheated the system, but because they had replaced it with something better. And the galaxy, unknowing but grateful, continued to spin through the cosmos under the subtle but watchful protection of a species that had learned how to make the impossible into the inevitable.